Hello again.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine, fine. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. We've got this thing set up that I have to admit people from the waiting room, and I'm not happy with having to do this. But
Is there no way to change it?
yes, there is. But this is the way it was set up for me today by my tech,
Oh, okay.
who then scolded me because I forgot to push record on the service this morning.
Uh-oh.
And as I explained to her, because I was busy admitting people that you put in the waiting room. But I'm not going to win that argument. I know that. All right, look at this.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Ted, thank you for that article you wrote for the News from the Pews.
Yeah.
Well, you're
Yeah.
welcome.
It nudged me. It got me to do some communicating with some people that I had been dragging my feet, and that wasn't getting it done. And
Oh,
I read what you wrote. I thought, go do it.
Well, praise
for
the
you.
Lord. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was very good. As was yours, Diana's. I always look at the News from the Pews. That's the first thing I look at. Where's her article?
Thank you so much.
It's really good.
Indeed.
Send me
Very
any
good.
suggestions. You have any suggestions of things that you'd like me to write about?
Yeah, good
Okay.
idea.
I
I'm running
do.
out of ideas.
I'd like you to write about fidget spinners.
Uh-oh, I don't even know what they are.
I didn't know either.
I have one.
Oh,
There you go.
See?
I used it as an image for the Trinity today.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
There you go, thinking out of the box.
Indeed. Pam, ask Ian. He'll know about a fidget spinner.
Yeah, I'm really surprised I don't know it, but huh. Okay.
All right. Anyway, so now all we're lacking is the person to lead the Angels of the Bible book study.
Okay.
And we're missing Dale.
Yes, we
he
must.
wasn't in church either.
I
No, he
know.
wasn't
we
in
must
church
have
today.
Dale. We must have Dale. Call him up.
Maybe they went somewhere.
Let me tell you what's going on in my life right now.
Yes.
I got this last week in the AAA bill. They send out paraphernalia and propaganda and stuff, and it has this young woman at a gas pump, and it says Sunday, 9:17 a.m. The moment when Erin realizes she has saved enough money on gas to indulge herself with a treat, and so she's pumping the gas, and so. I wrote on this. This is how far gone I am. Why isn't Erin in church?
yeah.
She's going to the 11 o'clock service.
She could put that savings in the offering plate.
Very good, brother.
Good.
I don't know. I think it's a sign of slippage, quite frankly, when you start to write on the advertisements that they send you.
Right.
Oh, well.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Minor problem.
Yeah.
Problem.
We still don't have a definitive on whether we can sing outside or not, congregationally sing, but we will find out this week.
Pat and I are going to sing no matter what.
Sure, not a problem. That's okay.
Well, I will sound better if I'm there and I wear my mask. If I take my mask off, then there's going to be a problem.
No good.
Ah, okay. So we have a leader who's trying to check in here, or sign in, or whatever it's called. She's muted,
Aha.
but that's not due to me. I didn't mute her.
Okay. You can check participants, see if she's, well, uh,
Malvina, are you with us?
she is.
I see her name, but that's all.
No mic. There it is.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Luda. I'm Malvina's mom. She'll be back in a second. The baby is crying, so
Okay.
Okay.
well,
that's
I'm
fine.
so sorry. She'll be back in a second.
That's
Okay.
all right. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
somebody's attending to Wyatt. That's good.
Yeah, excellent. Let's see her. No, she
Not
left
yet.
the room.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
I can see you when you lean back. I can see you from the chin up.
I have a new chair.
Oh, it's much better.
Yeah.
Before, all I could see was the top of your eyeglasses up.
I also have a haircut, finally.
Oh yeah, looks good.
Hmm.
I'm always tempted to ask when somebody says they got a haircut, which one?
Oh, geez. Like one.
Right here.
Oh, okay.
One hair.
Perfect. Makes all the difference.
Oh dear.
All right.
Well, I read 43 chapters. How about you?
I don't know who you're speaking to.
All of you.
Oh,
I read to page 157.
Oh, I can't remember.
You
I
read
read
further
nothing.
than I.
I read nothing this week. I was too busy writing on the advertisements that they sent me.
Well, contemplation is a good exercise.
I guess, if that's what we want to call it. I got to let Zoshilt in. There's Zoshilt's living room, apparently.
A nice, neat bookcase.
Are you all on a computer or a tablet?
Computer.
Computer.
Okay, so you can see everybody at once, right?
Yeah.
No.
Correct.
Yeah. See, we can't because we're on a tablet. We can only see 4 people at a time.
Oh, I guess I'm on a tablet. Yeah, I only can only
Okay.
one of those portable things. I can only see 4.
Okay. Yes. That's.
But I
the
can see
problem with-
Malvina.
Hi.
Is
I'm
Wyatt
here.
okay? Is Wyatt okay?
Yeah, he woke up absolutely screaming and didn't want to come down. So
Yeah, I have that problem a lot too. So
Well, let's not ask him any more questions about that.
No.
hold on, I'm gonna close the window.
Hi, Xochitl. Hi.
Oh, she's on mute.
Hello. Yeah, nice
Oh,
to see
there
you
you
guys.
go.
now, is that your lovely living room or is that a screen?
It's a screen.
Okay. It's too bad
I
because that's
was
very
gonna
nice.
say.
Very
Yeah.
nice looking. Yeah.
It's a
Very
very nice living room.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
So is Dale gonna join us, or does anybody know?
all we know is he wasn't there this morning.
Oh,
Okay.
probably not then.
He only misses church when he goes hunting.
Yeah, that's what I was
This
thinking,
is-
Diana.
This isn't
No
hunting season.
excuse.
No? Okay, I don't know.
Not hunting season. No deer can be hunted at this time.
Oh,
Or any kind of birds that I know.
Right. Well, Malvina, if you're ready, I think we're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay.
All right, I think last time we left off on chapter 22.
Mhm.
Correct. And before we get started, I don't know if you were with us for a brief while this morning, weren't you, for the service?
Yes.
In 2 of the songs that were chosen, the cherubim were mentioned, and in one of the songs, the seraphim were mentioned.
Oh, perfect.
But we pronounced it cherubim and seraphim, as you know. We
Yeah.
always do that, yeah. So.
Oh, wow. Sochult's magical there. She's half in and half out. I was actually in your sermon when you said something about the worm trying to understand the man is like man trying to understand the Trinity.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, that's perfect for us trying to figure out the angels.
Right, right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So on chapter 22, would anyone like to read the Bible verse? Luke 2, 8 to 11.
I'll read it. In that region, there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is the Messiah, the Lord."
So in this chapter, she talks about nature and how we can experience God, or we often experience God and angels, how we experience that easier in nature. So my question for you all is, why are we more open to God outside in nature? Or have you noticed that about yourselves?
I totally agree. I take a walk every morning, and I just think that when you're out in nature, you're witnessing God's creation all around you instead of man's creation when you're indoors. And the days I don't get my walk because it's raining or something like that, I miss something all day. So I think that's very true.
Yeah, I read somewhere a long time ago, I wish I remembered where it was, but the cathedrals are also designed to reflect nature. That's why we're looking up, just like you would look up into like trees in a canopy. I just thought that was an interesting tie-in.
There's something about the colors, especially when the sky is really blue, and in springtime when the trees are really green, the contrast between the color of plants and the sky I've always found really beautiful early in the morning. And no one could do that except God.
Colors of the rainbow when it rains.
And I think you feel more open, more free outside, when, especially in the quiet in the morning, like Kathy said, when you're walking, maybe especially here in Fallbrook, all you can hear are the birds. And I think it gives you a whole different perspective.
And we have a creek that I walk over on a little bridge every time. And that's, to me, that plants along the creek, and we have a mallard pair living down there. I hope they're going to have ducklings soon, but anyway, I like to see them on the creek.
And I think that it's true that we feel more connected to God there because that's God's creation and we're God's creation. And so in a home, people created it, but there we're in where we were meant to be, I suppose.
When we're inside, we have all these inanimate objects, you know? I mean, it's a whole different story when you're in the house as to when you're outside. Everything is different, really.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think I read somewhere Eckhart Tolle was talking about that we feel more comfortable in nature because it's taking us out of our environment and it's making us be in that moment. So at home, we may be thinking about what we need to do later, what we did before, but when we're in nature, we are just present.
Uh-oh, I'll pull my thing
Would somebody like to read page 109, Angel's Absence, from Luke 3:21 and 22?
I can read it. Let's see. Now, when all the people were baptized, and when Jesus also had been baptized and was praying, the heaven was opened, and the Holy Spirit descended upon him in bodily form like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased."
I thought this one was very interesting, and I hadn't noticed it before. But she says that angels are not present in this moment during Jesus's baptism. And what do you think of that? Do you angels have a role in baptism, or is it just a moment between us and God?
Well, maybe it's because they weren't needed because God himself was there.
Yeah. We didn't need an in-between or a person to go between. He wanted to talk directly to his Son. So he didn't need an angel to interpret anything or help along the way on that one.
Do you think that it's the same for us in baptism when we're baptized?
I think so. I think probably God is just doing it right then and there. I mean, he's talking to us, even though a lot of us are little tiny babies. But I'm sure God's there with us.
I wonder, like, we talked about guardian angels, or if they're there too, if they're just like cheering on, like, woo. Right, so let's read 24, the devil. It says, Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. And the author says that Jesus deliberately faces the devil immediately after his baptism and before he does anything else. This is a wonderful example for all humanity, for we cannot serve God until we distinguish between God's voice and the voice of the devil. All of us, even Jesus, must listen to the voice of the dark one. He questions all of us, even in the Garden of Evil. So the author says we do need to know the devil's voice, but darkness cannot withstand light and truth. And to do that, we need to know the landscape of our own mind. So how do we scan our own mind for these signs of darkness, and how do we overcome them? Does anyone have a practice of kind of thinking, oh, that's not from, we've talked a little bit about this, about looking at your mind and being quiet and present. But does anyone have an actual practice of looking for things that may not be from God?
I think I am more attuned to what's happening spiritually than I used to be. The reason I say that is because I will occasionally stop and say, wait a minute, this isn't right. Something's making me uncomfortable. I just said something that wasn't caring, or I didn't think about it first. And realizing that so many things are accomplished in steps and a little at a time. So even if I say something without thinking, and that seems to be a little thing, it is still not a loving thing. And so in a way, I think, well, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't thinking about temptation or testing. I just said whatever I thought without thinking. Anyway.
I think for me, recently during Lent, when we had, what was that booklet called that we,
The Living Compass book.
yeah, there was one in there where the author talked about how we're like a cup of coffee, and if we get bumped, the coffee spills out. But if there was tea in the cup, the tea would have spilled out, or if it was milk, the milk would have spilled out. And it really got me thinking about, well, what's inside me? You know, when I get bumped, I'm really grumpy. And so what is that that's coming out? That means that I'm maybe not scanning myself for how am I feeling at this moment, or it's kind of like what Ted said. It's like when I'm not really thinking and it just comes out. Well, what is it that's coming out, and why is that coming out?
The idea of counting to 10 before you say something, and if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. You know, all mothers, I think, teach their children that. I think it's a genetic thing in mothers, but that's even pre-kindergarten. So that is real special advice. To thwart the devil.
Yeah, it's also just think before you speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I think for me, that's a hard one. Like I kind of just talk and then I'm like, oh wait, what did I just say? Why did I say that? I don't believe that at all.
Yes. One of the interesting things I found in two different words, and we may have talked about these before, but in the passage quoted, the word tempted has also been translated, I think, from the Greek as tested. And depending on one's perspective, either one can work, I think. The other word was about 5 lines down in the text. It says, the devil is that anti-angel, the inevitable result of true freedom. And I stumbled over the word true, and I wrote unrestrained, unbounded, which can also to me mean utter chaos. The stereotypical example is children on a playground at a school, and they're all fenced in. They're having a great time. They don't even realize that in their freedom, they are restrained for their own safety. So those are some of my thoughts on that word phrase, true freedom. I think that probably the author meant unrestrained, unrestricted, that means chaotic.
Yeah, so then it's really the balance between God is like order and then the devil is chaos.
Yes.
Is that the same book? I don't know.
Yeah. Did anyone make a link between the devil and on the second page, panic, anxiety, stress, alienation, and the protests and particularly the riots and the horrific but few examples of police brutality?
Yeah, I thought that was really fitting for what we're going through as a nation right now. they say that, or I listen to this child psychologist sometimes, and she was talking about the opposite of love being fear.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, all of these things, that's where the devil comes in, is anything that can cause panic or anxiety or stress or alienation.
All comes from fear. Yeah.
All the negative things we see on media, you know, make us feel afraid or anxious. I also think that the devil plays in depression. People who get depressed and feel real low, you know. And I have Christmas depression. I'm chronically depressed at Christmas time. I love Christmas, but I know it's coming, so I try to psych myself out of it.
And it's also like, that's the time of the year to be the most joyful, but that's kind of like the chaos and order that you have to kind of face one to get to the other.
That's a good point.
You want everything to be perfect, but it never is.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, one of the things that got to me was a couple of times when some of the officers would kneel down near the protesters or next to them. And it seemed like, for the most part, and I know this is probably too broad a brushstroke, but for the most part, those protests went differently than some of the others did. And also, at least once, maybe twice, when protesters formed a barrier that kept a police officer safe when other protesters were coming after them.
I read that this morning. That was excellent.
Yeah. And to me, I have a little bit of experience with police officers in the sense that I was a chaplain to the Irvine Police Department for 3 years. And I was their first chaplain, so perfect, because whatever I did, I could just say, this is what chaplains do. They couldn't say, that's not what our previous chaplain did. So,
Perfect.
but they utilized me in a different way than anticipated when they asked me to become their chaplain. And what they ultimately utilized me for was, I just thought of it. They utilized me as an angel. They had me be the communicator to people who needed to hear that a loved one had been killed or had died. And one of the reasons that they didn't like to do it was, A, it's difficult to knock on somebody's door and say, oh, we're here to tell you that, and there was a very specific way that we did it. And that was, there's been an accident. Your loved one was involved. The accident was very serious. Unfortunately, your loved one did not survive. You never just said, oh, your loved one's dead. So you tried to soften it, you know, level by level. In the course of 30 seconds, you told the whole story, but you did it incrementally. And the officers didn't feel very comfortable with it because people didn't feel very comfortable with that presence at their front door. The presence of somebody in a uniform, you know, with a gun and a baton and all those kinds of things. You know, your first thing is, what did I do wrong? You know, or what happened? And so they bring along the guy with the white collar, and they'd have us or me do the talking. And I realized that it was not because they weren't compassionate. It was because they were not viewed as being compassionate. And so I think when an officer, and I was thinking of a former police officer whom I know, last name is Wood. And I was thinking, now I don't know what Steve was like as an officer of the law, but I know what he was like as a teacher, and I know what he's like as a Sunday school teacher and as a human being. And he's very gentle and very kind. And I'm sure that even as a police officer, that gentleness and kindness came across when it was appropriate. And I just think when a person can show that, it allows others to show it back. And it breaks down a false wall or a false narrative. And so I'm touched whenever I see something like that happen. It just touches me, and I think that that's how that communication. I mean, I know that people were sometimes terrified when they encountered an angel too, but when they heard the compassion in the angel's voice or saw them acting compassionately, it changed things.
Father Leland, you reminded me of something that everybody should know if they don't already. Pat was a police officer for San Diego Police Department for 14 years. So I know a little bit about the police as well. I'm glad you shared that, Father Leland. That was insightful for me.
Well, thank you. I didn't recall or know that Pat had been a police officer. So.
I was in the reserves for 14 years.
Okay, yeah.
I served almost full time, but I was never paid. But
yeah,
slight little problem. But.
You're the best kind of person. Yeah, great.
Yeah, you know the sergeants used to use myself, and I usually had a female partner, and they would use us when like there was a demonstration going to start or something of that nature, and they would put us up in front so that we would calm everyone in the area, see that people were not frightened of the women police. So we used to do that a lot. We used to get sent all over the countryside to do this, you know, and it seemed to work.
Yeah.
We seem to have good luck with keeping people calm. It's amazing.
I know that in Temecula, like a week ago, there have been demonstrations and protests every day, but a week ago, the police officers, the news article said that they had a standoff, but what it ultimately ended off being was that somebody from the crowd asked the police officers, like, how do you feel about this? Like, how do you feel standing on that side? And the officer everyone was quiet except for one officer, and he told them that how he felt about it, and he felt the same way that they felt. And ultimately, because he understood and they understood him in his position, everything was peaceful because they understood each other's pain.
Mm-hmm.
And just the fact that the officer was able to say, hey, look, I get it and I agree. You know, just that compassion and understanding.
And I think there's a reason that angels are messengers. You know, you couldn't even look upon God's face. You couldn't speak God's name. God was unattainable, unapproachable. And so this order was created to communicate with people. And I don't think we're as in awe of God as we used to be. I don't think that if God were in the next room, any of us would say, well, I'm not opening the door. No way. On the other hand, I think we still need the messenger aspect. And so I appreciate the fact that angels exist and that their communication skills are good. When somebody can come to our level and communicate with us, the likelihood is that things will happen in a good way.
Malvina, did you think that there was that officer that was speaking, that there was an angel facilitating that?
Probably. I mean, I think that there were probably angels there on both sides, you know, trying, because the people were there. So their guardian angels that are all there. And then the Holy Spirit is there and, you know, moving inside the officer too. Because where there's love, there's God, and his response was clearly out of a place of love. And then the people who heard it, their reactions were also from a place of love. And the people who were, everyone who was there, I mean, maybe a lot of the officers were there just because that's their job, but the protesters were there, a lot of them, maybe not all of them, also from a place of love. Some of them were there from a place of anger, which is understandable. But I don't know. I think where there's love, that God is there, and angels do facilitate that. So yeah, I suppose so.
What we need to always remember is that people who go into law enforcement, fire service, EMTs, all the first responders, made that choice because they wanted to help people. They didn't make that choice because they wanted power or something like that. And sometimes policemen are feared rather than welcomed into a situation that they're there to help.
I think on that, even if that's true for most officers, I think when you're in a position of service to others, right, which is what these people are there for, and especially if you have the presence of power, and that power comes in the baton that you hold and the taser that you have, in the institution that supports your presence, and in the gun that you can, you know, the fact that you have power in your presence. I think in these particular positions, this phrase that was in the book, do you know the landscape of your own mind? I think it's a lot. I think it's a constant and hard and very important work that people in these positions have to do. They have to continually reflect on what the landscape of their own mind is, because any slight move outside of, you know, that's not the right perspective, or any sort of feeling that they have that they're unaware of, they can make not mistakes, they can murder people.
Yeah,
right?
And they're afraid a lot of times too. Especially young cops are really afraid.
Right. So this landscape,
is
important, I think, especially in these sensitive positions.
You need to be afraid of people who have guns and are also afraid.
Yeah, right.
Always make good decisions.
Right.
I know that my mother-in-law used to work for the police department in Sunnyvale, and they have a psychologist available for any of the officers, any of the dispatchers. But kind of going back to the question, and what Sochelt said, is that you need to know your own mind in order to share that with a psychologist. So if you don't know and you're not aware of what's going on in yourself.
The department my husband worked for, you had to pass a very stiff psychological test and they turned a lot of people away. They turned a lot of military police, retired military police away. And what I always remember is this one fella that was turned away didn't pass the psych evaluation, went somewhere else and got hired. And after about 10 years, he came back and they laterally hired him without having him take the psych test over again. And I said, well, he could still have the same problems, whatever they are, you know. I don't understand that.
So it should be perhaps periodically,
Yeah.
mandatory sit down and talk.
Yeah, and then I guess that goes back to our own responsibility. I mean, we're not police officers, but in general.
Well, it comes back to the fear is when the devil is there.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a feeling that comes from God. unless it's healthy fear, healthy, like being careful type fear. But fear causes people to overreact and do things they might not ordinarily do.
I don't necessarily think that emotions, good and bad, fear, happiness, sadness, hate, I don't know that those are the bad ones are the bad ones, right? Are the devil's domain. I feel like, especially in the Hebrew scriptures, there was a lot of like God being angry, right?
Absolutely.
And God having these emotions, right? That we're supposing here in our conversations belong to the devil. I feel like perhaps one should and is able to feel all of these things, but the question is that landscape, right? Because as creatures, as humans, we will have these feelings and emotions. They will not go away, and we shouldn't suppress them, right? Because I think that leads
Our
to
humanness. That's our
right, exactly. And so I feel like where the devil can come in is if I'm feeling these things and I'm unaware and unable to feel comfortable in the discomfort, right? And I'm unable to find God in this discomfort and trust in God during this discomfort of these feelings. That's when the devil has an opportunity to come in. But I do not believe that these feelings are of the devil. I think that God has given us a range of emotions for reasons that are important, that he himself has used in many ways. But I think it's just how knowing ourselves and knowing that our anchor is God, that while we have these emotions, how do we act while we're in them? I think that is the domain of the devil, the choice that we have in our actions when we have these feelings.
Yeah, well said, Xochitl.
Yeah, I agree totally. The feelings that we have are natural and they're going to be there. And you're absolutely right. The problem can be is if we're too engaged in these feelings, then the devil can come in and tempt us with something perhaps that he wants us to do. And then is when we get into the trouble, I think.
Right.
I with what you were saying there, totally.
Because God, that's what happened, right? That's why we exist.
Yeah.
God gave us the ability of choice.
Right.
And it's that landscape, right? It's knowing the fact that we have choice in everything that we do and what we're choosing. Being clear about the choice.
I was thinking that when Malvina was having to quiet Wyatt, which I thought was kind of fun to say, quiet Wyatt. But Wyatt wakes up with terror. He wakes up screaming. And if you've had a bad few minutes before that happens, and you're already a little bit wound up, who knows what could happen and does happen sometimes with parents.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure that you were able to say to him, hey, give him a hug or pat his back or whatever it was that you did or that you do, soothing words. And you took a fraught experience or a fraught opportunity and made it into a good situation. And that's what I think God is always calling us to do. So we do have to check that landscape and know what's going on in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why our faith is so important, and study of our faith and prayers and doing all the things that we can to make sure that we are in an acceptable place so that we can be accepted. That's the biggest message I've ever gotten from God. And I thought about since last week when you all had something to share, many of you had something to share about when you had encountered an angel. And I thought about probably the one time that I did, and the message was very clear. You are accepted. Accept others. And I think that's what I was trying to say in my sermon this morning, and I'll not go through it for those of you who weren't fortunate enough to be there. But, it's the Trinity is all about relationship with God and relationship within God, among gods, not between, because between's only two, but and it's our relationship then that spills over to the people around us. And that's why a person who comes home from church feeling really good and immediately yells at their wife or their husband or their kids or their parents is missing the point.
Yeah.
Sochel, what you said also made me think about another one of the things that we read during Lent about being in the wilderness and not trying to run from the wilderness, and really just being there and looking through why you're there and see how do you face this. And it's in that wilderness that you are tempted by the devil, but you don't have to agree with him. But you have to be in the wilderness, and that's maybe where the fear or doubt comes in. But it's necessary.
Right.
One of the things that's tangential that I bring up too frequently probably is the idea of who's doing the testing. Some people say, or I've heard that God tests me, perhaps every day. And I don't like that at all, because that's saying, let's see if he'll pass the test today.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just throw something in front and see what Ted does. What I think the situation is that circumstances of my own choosing or external that I don't control are the test situation or vehicle. And then my choice, as several have said today, is how do I approach that? What is my attitude? And will I decide? And then at that point, I might be tempted by the devil.
Yeah. There's so much to process with everything we've been saying. But for lack of time, let's go to 25. Would anybody like to read that one?
Sure,
On page 113.
Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him.
So she said that, oops, hold on. So she says that when communication with God increases, angels come around more. And so her question is why, or something that she made me think of is, why don't we talk and focus more on good news?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for one thing, the media doesn't.
No.
They get very wrapped up in bad news.
They think that that's what everyone wants to hear,
Mm-hmm.
that everyone wants to see, because that's their general setting, I think, is that's what they feel like is going to, sell more news or sell more TV stuff, the bad stuff. But
I think also the bad stuff, though, is a call to action. I think also the media does play a lot in in putting a lot of very inappropriate, gruesome things on, right? I think we could all agree. But I think also it's a call, I don't know, I feel like sometimes it is a call to action, like sure, poverty has halved, but it still exists. This is why we need to show it, because if it's not in our mind's eye, it doesn't exist, right? But it does, it's a reality for some people.
Well, for example, I was reading an article on hunger, And this gal said, what they don't tell you is that in the last 20 years,
Yes.
we have reduced world hunger in half. Now
Right.
that's good news, right?
That's good news.
Yeah.
Now we don't hear about that.
No.
Be a good news statistic.
There's something that I mentioned before, but the concept of landscape of your mind that Xochitl mentioned so eloquently, I really do try to focus on the good in people, the good in a situation, not to negate humanity's imperfection or situations or possibilities, but I really think the idea of me or others looking for the good in something, just smiling at someone can change the entire atmosphere and discussion. Just a honest smile.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
I also think about Mr. Rogers, how he had that, how to explain things to children, is that to look for the helpers. So the bad things are there, but there are always people who are there helping, trying to improve it, trying to make things better. And so I wonder if it's not necessarily that angels appear more, or are there more because you're focusing on the positive. I think you just notice them more.
Yeah, good point.
And I do think that we are, our brains are wired to notice the dangers, and so that's why we are maybe attracted to it a little bit, just to say, hey, be aware of this, be careful of this, so this doesn't happen to you. It's kind of like how do I protect myself? And so if your brain wants to know what's wrong, so it can keep you safe. But then it's our job to say, okay, yes, this is a danger, but what can I do? What's the positive? Where are the help? Just like Mr. Rogers, where are the helpers?
Yeah.
I find the comment, look for God in everything. Jesus looked for the good in everyone. He always was in the presence of the marginalized and helped the marginalized. And so good can come out of that, did come out of that. And so just take a homeless person. I have a story that I won't tell, but too long. But there is some good that comes out of an encounter with a homeless person. I've had multiple friends or relatives who've been homeless. Anyway, look for the good. Jesus is in the marginalized. Jesus is on the fringe. That's where Jesus serves, where the Holy Spirit is. Even if we're uncomfortable or it's a dangerous situation, that's where I have to believe that God is there more, if we will take advantage of that.
Yeah, and this your comment, Ted, actually moves us into the next one, 26, chapter 26. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool called in Hebrew Beth Zapha, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. For an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever stepped in first, after the stirring of the water, was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. And the author says that in the earliest versions of the gospel, the mention of the angels is missing. She asks, why do we so often deny the possibility that they are both present in the breeze, the angels and God? And I think that we're all here because we're willing to entertain either we believe in or we are willing to entertain the idea of angels stirring up the breeze. And so why do you think that other people may not entertain these ideas?
I really like this passage, and I have one of these Bibles that, it has all the different versions in it. So I got it out, and sure enough, the King James Version includes verse 4, which talks about the angels. But then the NIV doesn't have it. I never noticed this. It skips from 3 to 5. And it just, as if 4 didn't exist. Same thing with the New Living Translation. They just completely skip that. And I just found that really interesting that they would omit something about angels. I guess it's the prejudice of the writers, of the authors. But anyway, I like the King James Version.
Never heard you say that.
I like Old English. That works for me in religion is having the these and the thous and thines and so forth. I just really like that.
Does your version have the Message?
No, it has the New Living Translation instead of the Message.
Message would say about that.
I'm trying to see. I don't remember if she said why it was left out of the
I
other
think she
version.
said that it was an addition later. She didn't identify the person or reasons, but that's what's happened. Verses have been taken out or added for because they weren't legitimate or weren't in the original canon.
Someone didn't think they were legitimate.
Right. Someone didn't think. Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to hop off a little early, but I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Always a pleasure.
Jill, can you wait for a story I have?
Oh, sure.
A short story.
Short story.
When I was about 9 or 10, I was in Savannah, Georgia, and my uncle had a long pier, wooden pier out to where his boat was. And I was swimming, and then I would get up and on the pier, and then I fell into the water, and a black older man named Cool Breeze immediately jumped in and saved me from getting killed by running up against the barnacles on the pier. And before I could practically know what was happening, he had me up on the pier again. Now, I'll tell you, in hindsight, he was an angel, a real person, but acting like an angel. And in those days, that was in the 50s. So you can imagine the racial prejudice and so forth at the time. But nonetheless, I find that a fascinating, beautiful story of people looking out for people. In this case, he happened to be black, but I like in this section, it says Cool Breeze.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Yeah, so I'll stop there, Xochitl. So that
thank you for that story. That's great. It's a great story to leave with.
I read that Bible verse. Butter, you named him Cool Breeze.
Bye, y'all.
Yeah.
Bye, Xochitl. That's funny. So Ted, you believe in the cool breeze of angels?
Oh, yes, I do.
Absolutely.
Yes, I do.
Malvina,
Yes.
why don't we just consider stopping now? We only have 3 minutes left if we stick to our hour.
Yeah.
And that way Xochitl doesn't have to miss anything. Is that okay with everybody else?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. And then we pick it up with chapter 27 next week.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll have to do another meeting thing because I only set this for 4 sessions, but we'll set up another Zoom meeting thing and that'll be communicated. So don't use this one or the one from this week, next week, because it won't work.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
You'll have a new one sent out. Same thing for the Sunday morning.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
great. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Say hi to Wyatt for us.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Malvina.
Yeah,
Bye,
thank
Kathy.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi.
Bye.